Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that the Mormon Battalion has a monument that allows you to step back in time for an interactive experience? Take the opportunity to learn more about the unsung heroes of the Mormon Battalion and how a one-year enlistment in the U.S. Army helped fill the need to defend America in the Mexican-American War.
I want to start today by asking you to do something that sounds simple, but is actually pretty demanding.
Okay.
I want you to imagine walking. I don't mean a casual stroll around the neighborhood and not even, a serious weekend hike.
Right.
I want you to imagine walking 2,000 miles.
2,000 miles, which, just for context, is roughly the distance from London to Istanbul.
Exactly. Or if you want a domestic comparison, it's basically walking from New York City all the way to Salt Lake City.
It's a huge distance.
It's a massive distance. Now, add some layers to this. Imagine doing that walk in 1846.
Okay, so no paved roads.
No paved roads.
Okay.
You're wearing ill-fitting leather shoes, if you even have shoes. You're walking through these unmapped deserts where water is basically a myth.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the kicker.
Yeah.
You are technically serving in the United States Army, except your only actual combat experience involves being charged by a herd of angry wild animals.
It sounds like the plot of a very strange, gritty Western movie, doesn't it?
It really does. But
Yeah.
This is a distinct and honestly kind of baffling slice of American history.
A very distinct slice.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are unpacking the story of the Mormon Battalion. This was a group of about 500 pioneers, Latter-day Saints, who joined the U.S. Army during the Mexican-American War.
And the stack of sources we're looking at today is, well, it's heavy. We've got historical accounts of the march, journals from the soldiers, military archives on the commanders, especially a guy named Philip St. George Cook we'll talk about a lot.
Right, and details from the Mormon Battalion Monument, an historic site down in San Diego.
Exactly.
And what we're really trying to do here is move past the simple timeline version of this story. We want to unpack the geopolitical layers.
For sure. On the surface, it's a military story. But underneath, it's a story about a very cynical political deal, a unique religious migration, and a physical feat that, military historians still kind of shake their heads at.
Exactly. We want to understand how a religious group formed the only military unit of its kind in U.S. history, and just how they survived walking across 7 states without GPS or reliable supply lines.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. We have to start with the context, because this didn't just happen in a vacuum. Where does this story actually begin?
Well, you have to set the stage in 1846. The United States has just entered the Mexican-American War, and this whole idea of manifest destiny is in full swing.
The idea that the U.S. is destined to expand across the entire continent.
Right, from sea to shining sea. And in the White House, you have President James K. Polk.
And Polk has a problem.
A massive problem. He needs manpower. Specifically, he needs boots on the ground to help secure the western territories, California and New Mexico, before anyone else can get a foothold. He needs bodies to secure the map.
Meanwhile, you have the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, and their situation is, well, it's complicated. They're not exactly feeling patriotic at this point.
That's putting it mildly. They are in the middle of this massive, desperate migration. They've been driven out of Nauvoo, Illinois, by mobs.
Their prophet, Joseph Smith, had been killed just 2 years prior.
Yeah. So they are basically homeless, encamped in the Iowa Territory, trying to figure out how to get to the Rocky Mountains before winter just wipes them out.
So you have these two groups, the U.S. government, which failed to protect them, and the church, which is fleeing the U.S. How on earth do they end up shaking hands?
It all comes down to a meeting on June 5, 1846. President Polk sits down with a man named Elder Jesse C. Little.
And he wasn't a general.
No, not at all. He was the presiding elder over the New England and Middle States mission for the church. He was in D.C. to lobby for help.
Okay, but why would Polk even listen? If I'm the president, and I know this group is essentially leaving the country because the West wasn't really the U.S. yet, why do I care about helping them?
That's the nuance right there. Elder Little's pitch was brilliant. He didn't ask for charity. He proposed a transaction. He basically said, employ us, we're moving west anyway, pay us to fortify the West while we do it.
It's kind of a mercenary pitch.
In a way, yeah. We're going that way, you need soldiers that way, let's make a deal. But for Polk, it solved 2 problems. One, He gets loyal American troops in California without having to ship them from the East Coast.
And two,
Two, and this is the political subtext, it kept the Mormons within the American sphere of influence.
right, because if they go west and start their own country or ally with the British,
Yeah.
that's a huge problem for the U.S.
Exactly. So keeping them on the payroll keeps them loyal. It was the ultimate win-win deal, born out of necessity, not friendship.
So the pioneers needed cash to fund their migration.
Desperately. To buy wagons, food, supplies. And the president needed bodies in the West.
So Polk gives the green light. He authorizes this battalion for a 1-year term. Now, how does this news land back in Iowa? Because if I'm a pioneer who just got kicked out of my home and now I'm being told to go join the U.S. Army, I might have some questions.
Oh, there was absolutely resistance. I mean, emotions were raw. There was so much distrust. But Brigham Young, the church leader, was incredibly pragmatic. He noted this is from the records, the first time the government offered aid to the church.
Which is a very polite way of saying we finally got some of our tax money back.
Essentially. But he also saw the strategic value. Nearly 500 men could travel west at the government's expense, wearing government boots. Well, maybe not boots, we'll get to that. And their paychecks would support the families left behind.
So the call goes out, they're mustering forming up in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and this is where we see just how weird this military unit really was.
Yeah, who actually signed up.
Yeah.
Captain James Allen, the Army officer assigned to lead them, was looking for 5 companies of able-bodied men, 18 to 45.
Standard stuff.
Standard stuff. They get 543 men. But when you look at the roster, it's not just soldiers.
No, I was reading the breakdown in the source material, and there's a number that just jumps out.
You're looking at the families.
Yes. Nearly 80 women and children accompanied them.
Right. Now, in the 19th century, camp followers were a thing. Laundresses, sometimes wives. But this was different. This wasn't a deployment. It was a migration.
These families had nowhere else to go.
Exactly. So you have a U.S. Army battalion with women and children marching alongside the soldiers. It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
I can't even imagine.
It was. And it caused friction later on. But here's this statistic that really sets them apart. To this day, the Mormon Battalion remains the only military unit in American history comprised entirely of a single religious denomination.
That is wild. The 100% Mormon unit.
It created a very unique culture. They held religious services. They prayed. They tried not to swear, which really annoyed their non-Mormon commanders.
I want to go back to the money, because there's a detail about their uniforms that I think just paints such a clear picture of their mindset.
Oh, yeah, this is crucial. So the soldiers received a clothing allowance for the year. It was $42 per person.
And in 1846, that's a lot of money. Using an inflation calculator, that's like, what, $1,500 or $1,600 today?
It's a significant chunk of change. And normally, you'd use that to buy, a uniform, a greatcoat,
Yeah.
good boots.
Things to keep you alive.
Exactly. But because this was a volunteer militia situation, uniforms weren't technically mandatory. So what did they do?
They kept their street clothes.
The vast majority of them. They didn't buy uniforms.
So they just pocketed the cash.
Not for themselves. They collected it, pooled it together, and sent it back to their families and church leaders in Iowa. It was used to buy wagons, oxen, flour, all the supplies for the main group crossing the plains the next year.
Let's just pause on that for a second. They are about to march 2,000 miles into a desert, and they choose to do it in their worn-out civilian clothes so their community could survive.
It completely reframes the whole thing. For them, this wasn't about military glory. It was a financial sacrifice for the communal good. They were selling their labor and risking their lives to keep the larger group alive.
That really raises the stakes for what happens next, because they step off from Council Bluffs on July 20th, 1846. They don't arrive in San Diego until January 29th, 1847.
6 months of walking.
And not just walking, we need to talk about the route. From Iowa down through Kansas, then cutting across the Southwest through what is now New Mexico and Arizona.
And let's be clear about the terrain. This is not rolling green hills.
Far from it. This was high desert, scorpions, rattlesnakes, and the biggest enemy of all, thirst. The journals describe going days with barely enough water to wet their tongues.
Digging these deep wells and dry riverbeds, just hoping for a muddy cup of water.
And there's that incident in the journals, Box Canyon.
Oh, that is a testament to sheer grit. They reached a point where the canyon walls narrowed so much their wagons couldn't fit.
A normal army might just abandon the wagons.
Right, or find a detour that takes weeks. But they couldn't, because those wagons carry their supplies and the sick. So what do?
They got out pickaxes and chisels.
And they literally hewed a road through solid rock. They widened the canyon by hand. You can still see the marks on the rock today.
Unbelievable. And this was under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Philip St. George Cook, right?
Yes, he took over about halfway through. He was a career military man, hard as nails. And initially, he was not thrilled about leading this religious ragtag group.
With families tagging along.
Exactly. He imposed strict discipline. But, and this is interesting, by the end of the march, he had developed a profound respect for them.
He issued a statement at the end, didn't he?
He did. He wrote, "History may be searched in vain for an equal march of infantry." He specifically highlighted that they marched through wilderness where, as he put it, nothing but savages and wild beasts are found, or deserts so dry there wasn't even a living creature.
History may be searched in vain. That's high praise. But that hardship had a cost. The sources mention casualties.
Yes, and this is the tragic reality. The environment is deadlier than any enemy. 20 members of the battalion died during the journey.
But not from bullets.
No. It was illness, exhaustion, the sheer physical toll. They were buried in unmarked graves along the trail.
Which brings us to a very specific and slightly strange intersection of faith and military reality. Before they left, Brigham Young made a prophecy about them.
He did. He promised them that if they were faithful, not a single member of the battalion would be lost to enemy engagement.
Now, if you're a soldier, that's the assurance you want. You won't get shot. But here's the twist, and this is honestly my favorite part of the story. They did fire their weapons.
Right.
They did have a battle.
The infamous Battle of the Bulls.
Please explain this, because if I saw this in a movie, I'd say the writers were running out of ideas.
It does sound made up. So they're marching through the San Pedro River Valley in modern-day Arizona. The area was populated by wild cattle.
Feral bulls?
Yes, bulls that had been left behind by Mexican ranchers and had gone completely wild. And these are not docile dairy cows.
Oh, these are massive, territorial, aggressive bulls.
And the battalion inadvertently marched right into their territory. The bulls felt threatened, and they charged the column.
So you have 500 soldiers ready for war, and suddenly they're being flanked by livestock.
It was chaos. Bulls were flipping wagons, goring the mules. I mean, it was life-threatening. The soldiers had to form firing lines and shoot the attacking bulls to stop the charge.
So they fought the bulls, and they won.
They survived. Reports say 10 to 15 bulls were killed, 2 mules were gored to death, 3 men were wounded, but nobody died.
So technically, the prophecy held up.
That's how they saw it. They engaged in combat, they fired their weapons in anger, but they never fought an opposing human army. The prophecy regarding enemy engagement held true. It just didn't account for bovine intervention.
Incredible. So they survived the bulls, they survived the desert, and they finally make it.
Yes, they crossed the Colorado River into California and reached the Pacific Ocean near San Diego on January 29th, 1847.
Let's talk about that arrival. The war's still technically happening, but their role seems to shift immediately.
Yeah, by the time they got there, the fighting in California was largely over. So they transitioned almost instantly from marchers to builders.
They put down their rifles and picked up hammers.
Exactly. San Diego was a tiny pueblo then. They dug wells. They made fired bricks, which was new for the area. In fact, the sources highlight that they helped build the city's very first courthouse. They laid out streets.
So they weren't just occupying the territory, they were developing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to zoom out a bit. The march itself was incredible, but the route they took, that seems even more important.
You've hit on the key historical impact. The route they carved out became known as Cook's Wagon Road.
And why does that matter?
Because it was the first feasible wagon route to California through the Southwest. During the Gold Rush, which started just a year later, thousands of 49ers used that exact road.
No way.
Stagecoach lines used it. Even later, the Southern Pacific Railroad followed nearly the same alignment.
So they didn't just walk across the desert. They essentially drew the map for American expansion into the Southwest.
They blazed the trail, literally.
Speaking of the Gold Rush, there's a connection there too, right? Their one-year enlistment ends in July 1847. What happens then?
It was a mix. Some headed straight to Utah to find their families, but others needed money, so they stayed in California to work. And some of those veterans were at Sutter's Mill, working for John Sutter, right when gold was discovered in January 1848.
So battalion veterans were there at ground zero of the Gold Rush.
Their diaries have some of the earliest accounts of the discovery, so their fingerprints are all over the expansion of the West, from the roads to the courthouses to the gold mines.
And that legacy is preserved today. If you go to Old Town San Diego, There's a monument dedicated to them.
Yes, and a really extensive interpretive center. It was completely renovated around 2010. It's designed to let you step back in time. And it really tries to highlight not just the men, but the women and children who made that trek.
It's amazing to think about standing in San Diego today, grabbing a fish taco, and realizing what it took to get there.
It definitely puts our modern travel complaints into perspective. Oh, my flight was delayed an hour.
Ugh, try walking 2,000 miles in broken shoes while fighting a bull.
Fair point.
So let's recap. We have a religious group that makes a deal with the president. They form a battalion with families. They use their clothing money to feed their community. They walk 2,000 miles, carve roads through rock, fight a herd of bulls, build a courthouse, and then help discover gold.
That is the story. It's a story of endurance.
And I think endurance is the key theme. It wasn't flashy. It was just putting one foot in front of the other for a really, really long time.
I agree. You know, there's a quote from the source material referencing the scriptures they would have carried. Prove all things. Hold fast that which is good.
Hold fast that which is good.
It suggests that when you're tested, when you're proving yourself against hardship, you have to cling to what matters.
Yeah.
For them, that was faith, family, community. They endured that march because they were dedicated to a difficult task that served a purpose bigger than themselves.
They weren't walking for the army. They were walking for the people back in Iowa.
Precisely. And that sense of purpose is what pushed them through.
It's a powerful reminder. I mean, we might not be marching across the desert today, but we all face things that feel like a long uphill slog.
And that brings us to the question we want to leave you with. The Mormon Battalion endured 2,000 miles of wilderness for a cause they believed in. They traded comfort for the survival of their community. So, thinking about your own life, what is a difficult task in the modern world that offers a similar gain from the effort? What's a hard thing worth doing today?
That is a great question to chew on. Walking 2,000 miles might not be on your to-do list, but maybe there's something else that requires that same level of grit. Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.